Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Veteran Instincts on the 106th Squadron YouTube channel. We are back to Vassal this week for a game between Martyn Chivers, ex-UK System Open champion, and the Firestorm Squadron Firecast Supremo Nic Harris in the third round of the ongoing online Vagabond Open.
And in this match, I think we're doing something a bit different. So in all of our past games, we've had optimized or very nearly optimized lists. In this one, we've got something different. So Nic, do you want to tell us a little bit about your list and where it came from?
Sure. So I've taken part in the Janky Open, which is the Fly Better podcast and Ghost Squadron podcast collaboration. And this is the list I was sent with a minor tweak, which has somewhat shaken my mind as to what the actual original list was. I drop something to add in Special Forces Gunner and Backdraft. But so it's Captain Phasma with Concussion Missiles Fire Control, Backdraft with Special Forces Gunner, a I3 Ty Baron First Order Provocateur with Snapshot, and the Senior Janus Engineer with no upgrades at all, which is the Silencer. I was initially a little bit worried about the list, but when I talked to some friends, I went, actually, no, that's actually not too bad at all. It's not obviously a top tier list or anything like that, but it has a few little nice surprises, and I found it to fly pretty neatly. So the Senior Janus Silencer is just a great blocker. The Backdraft is just a solid ship that we know can get 3 dice at the front, down out the back. And the fire control system with the concussion missiles has proven to be quite effective in keeping guns on target, and another 3 dice gun really. The kind of sneaky little trick that there is the snapshot. So with the BA being able to use to take a deplete token in order to get a lock or barrel roll as an action, as a maneuver, an action after the maneuver, it can then use snapshot to clear that deplete token and still have a focus token as well. So you can get a fully modded lock focus out of that. So it just becomes a really solid kind of damage output list, really. A lot of 3 dice guns that can get shots on target.
Yeah, it's definitely not bad for a jank tank creation for sure.
Yeah.
And so, Martyn, I think you knew Nic was running his jank tank list coming into this game. So did that then influence your decision on what to run?
Slightly, a little bit. I was already looking at running a scum list because that was the next one I lined up for the tournament, but I wasn't going to make it completely super good because I knew that Nic's list wasn't optimal. So I just decided I'd try and use a couple of ships that I've never, or I don't think I've ever put some of them on the table, not even in 1.0. So it was just a case of using ships that I own that I don't use and just trying to make some sort of janky, beefy scum list that could be quite fun to use. So, and we'll see how it went.
Absolutely.
So just some definitions, always good to start with definitions. So for anyone watching that doesn't know, we're talking about a couple of different tournaments there. This is, as I said earlier, the third round of the Vagabond Open. The rules for that tournament are, it's an extended tournament, but that you need to use a different faction each round. So that's what Martyn was talking about when he was saying that he sort of had scum in his mind for this round, sort of from the start. And then the Jank Tank Open is a tournament being run by a combination of the Fly Better and Gold Squadron podcasts. And they have gone slightly more different, and they've got each participant had a choice of 2 randomly generated lists and was allowed to make 1 change to the list that they chose. We'll go into that in more detail when we cover one of those games. Cool. So we sort of join it here with you guys placing ships. Let's start with Nic. What were you looking for in terms of which obstacles did you bring, first of all, and what were you looking at in terms of the obstacle placement?
To be honest, I bought gas clouds because I'm used to flying them with AC lists, so it's something that I'm comfortable doing. And being able to kind of maneuver around and gain the extra evades and things is something that I like, particularly for the 2 SFs. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of my train of thought when I bring those. Positionally during the setup, I tend to use the senior Janus just to kind of find out where my opponent's going to be, just because it's an I1. If I'm going down first, just stick it on the side, and it's fast enough to get away and be where it wants to be, really. So that was kind of my opening thoughts.
And Martyn, what about you?
Well, I because of knowing Nic's list, I actually knew that he had the 3 gas clouds on the table beforehand. So I was just picking up a few extra rocks, just that it wasn't just complete gas clouds. I hadn't really decided what rocks I wanted. It was just throw some extra bits in. I've got 2 medium base ships, which I'm still trying to get to grips with, especially on vassal. So I was like, well, I don't want giant rocks. And as for replacement, well, I thought, because I knew that pretty much my list went down after his silencer, I was like, well, I'm going to set up for the joust. I'm not expecting him to joust, but I have no idea where the rest of the stuff's going to be. So if I can at least keep my ships together for now, we'll see where he ends up and go from there.
I found it really interesting in your setup, Martyn, that you have the Fang on the inside and then the Cartel Spacer and the Cartel Marauder on the outside, which are the 2 that don't have boost. Was there a thought process behind that? Is that trying to use the Fang's Concordia Dawn title, or was there maybe not as much thought into that?
To be honest, I don't think there was as much thought into that, because half the ships I'm at the time I'm still thinking, what does Edar do? So it's just kind of, let's put them down and then we'll work it out as the game goes out.
Sure, no, absolutely. I've been running M3As or Cartel Spacers a bit recently, and it does take a while to get used to the fact that they don't have a boost. You kind of expect things, because they're small and nimble, to just automatically have that, and it really changes the way you have to fly them when it obviously doesn't.
Yes. And I think you'll probably see in these opening terms that where I think I could have really done with a boost here.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, turn 1, I think, looks exactly like that.
And I think, Lloyd, the reason you sort of mentioned him being on the inside or on the outside is you tend to want the faster ship on the outside, assuming that everything's turning into the centre of the board, because that's the one that's able to kind of make up the ground to keep up. If you have your faster ship on the inside, then sort of you reduce that everything then has to start going at the speed of the slowest ship, if you want everything to kind of engage at the same point. So we can see mine here kind of already clearly has the kind of advantage in terms of health and weight of fire, and so already sort of aggressive turn-ins to throw in the centre of the board. So what's the reason we thought that this would be an interesting match? Obviously, it's not high tier meta list. We've got some good players, but with some less good lists. Is that it's a real good example of kind of having to think on the fly, having to work out not only what your own list does, which hopefully if you're going to a big tournament, most people would sort of have that bit down, but something that we all need to do in big tournaments, which is hit something that we've not seen before, something a bit more janky, something unexpected, and work out, with limited time available, how to approach that. So Martyn, you've not seen this list before. What are your thoughts going in? What does your ideal engagement look like?
Well, it's just sort of, at the moment, I'm just trying to sort of cut across the board. I'm not sure where his 3 ships that are moving at the moment are about to go, so whether they're trying to come round and behind. So I thought, well, if I can come up, maybe scare the silencer inwards, which I was expecting him to do anyway, and I can just sort of cut across the middle of the board, and when he decides to turn his other ships in, I hopefully will have arcs on them, because I think with the initiatives, them being 4s, they'll get to shoot or reposition, even if it's only a barrel roll, after I've moved. So it's just trying to make sure that I will have the shots when they end up at their final positions.
So sort of spreading your arcs relatively wide, not
Yes.
giving them the opportunity to go inside. And Nic, same question, I suppose. What are you looking for? It's quite intimidating. Martyn's got a real kind of classic janky list, right, that you hit in sort of round 1, round 2 of a tournament, where you look at it, you think, well, I don't expect that to be on the top tables at the end of the day, but Christ, it looks horrible to face right now. Why isn't someone else playing it? How do you approach it? All of these firing arcs, all of this beef. What's the plan?
Well, I mean, to give a little bit more context, Martyn and I've known each other for quite a few years now. We used to play a lot together in 1.0 and then 2.0, and I've no idea how many games we've played against each other. So to know that Martyn is a good player, and been there all the way through the system open run and everything else, it's a scary prospect to face that much health. Especially when you got things like the Fang, which can punch a load of damage, the 3 dice on the Skurg as well, and the Kimagila are all scary ships in particular. And it influenced where my 2 SFs go. So normally they would have gone in the middle, but with the weight of firepower that I knew could come through the 2 gaps, I had to come down towards the bottom and try get around the outside a bit and kind of limit the amount of shots you could have in each one at any one time.
Yeah. And I like that. So Martyn, you could see, just because of the sheer, number of ships he's got and the size of those medium bases, had to set up in a sort of slightly more elongated formation than you normally see, not that tight block you can achieve with the 4 kind of small bases. So by setting up in the far corner from him, you've increased the chances that on that first engage, you're only trading far with the front row of his ships and not the entire list. Whereas, as you say, if you kind of gone in the middle, then you don't have that space, and likelihood is that everything fires at your SFs in the first round.
Yeah, particularly with that center debris cloud there. The maneuverability just isn't there to be able to get around and get out again. The dial in the SF is great for turning on things, but in terms of reposition, you've only got a barrel rolls. There's no boost or anything like that to change your angles. So to kind of get round and get the shots you want is actually not the easiest thing in the world if you haven't got the space to do it.
So we're coming into turn 2 here, and you can see that sensibly that silencer sort of continuing to run. Obviously, the rest of your list isn't in position yet to allow that to turn in, but quite a nice spot you've turned there. You've got the 1 hard in if you want it, but you are stressed. So he's maybe forced to run away from another turn. Martyn, presume you're just going to sort of be continuing to wheel in towards the top of the board here. Your ships are a little bit close together up at the top there. Is that sort of just inexperience with the setup and with the list?
Yes, I was expecting the Cartel Executioner to actually bump the Cartel Marauder there, but so I was quite surprised it actually fit along through. But yes, they were a bit closer than I anticipated them being at the start.
I was going to say I was really impressed with how tightly you flew them into each other, and then didn't realise you were hoping to bop it.
I mean, I wasn't intending to bop it. I was just sort of because like we said at the start, without the Cartel Marauder and the Cartel Spacer having boosts, it's suddenly thinking, well, I need to get them in quicker, so I'll barrel roll them in, and then it's kind of now thinking, oh great, now that I'm here, how do I avoid the Cartel Executioner from bumping into them? So as you can see now, I'm trying to sort of barrel roll them out the way, and again to keep the arc fan to get positions round, but it's still just trying to get used to those medium bases and how far they move, and especially now with like the Lot Revenant being here, it's sort of I don't really want to barrel roll towards his ships, especially if he turns in. I don't really want to sit there because I'm going to be going over the gas cloud probably anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll barrel roll that way. Again, not great, but if he's turned in, I don't want all 3 of them to have guns on me, and it's only 1 agility.
Yeah, you don't want to lose half the Lock Revenant for little back, potentially even no fire back in the opening turn. It does give your Cartel Executioner a bit of an issue now, in that it's slightly hard to see where he's going. I presume that he's gonna end up bumping this turn if he's not going straight. But not in a bad position. You've got the Fang slightly further forward, harrying that silencer. It's going to keep it out of the fight next turn. Your Kirax and your Seek are, or Skik, I think it's pronounced, have got nice lanes to kind of bank into the board there. And the medium bases are in slightly awkward positions, especially with that gas cloud, but we'll see how they sort themselves out. And Nic sort of wheeling around the bottom into the fight. So I don't know if there's going to be, might be a range 3 shot here from the TIE Baron. We'll see in a moment.
Yeah, I mean, it was a case of that was going to be the nearest ship that I could probably get shots on. And that was kind of part of the game plan. If I can kind of position there, it forces him to do the barrel roll and reposition and take the stress, and still have to come around the gas cloud, which just forces him wide a bit. So I mean, it's range 3 through the gas cloud. It's even with 1 agility dice as basic, it's probably not going to hit. But it's just that extra bit of pressure just to keep things where Martyn didn't want to be particularly, and just keep the pressure on was the thoughts behind it.
Yeah, they're not great quality shots, but getting a bunch of early shots into something, especially that only has 1 agility, allows you to get ahead on that damage race.
We can see that there with the 3 dice from Backdraft, slightly fortuitous, the blank out from the Lock Revenant, so it's already taken a shield at this point, and then it's got another range 3 shot coming in. Range 3 from Nic here, obviously perfect in that he's not going to take any fire back from that range 1 to 2 dorsal turret, and again plinks another shield through on the lock. So a nice opening engagement, so long as the silencer doesn't take too much from the Fang here. And again at range 3, he's tokenless, so a bit of a risk. And the 3 hits. So at this point, a little bit worried, and yeah, it does plink through a shield. So fairly even trade in the end there. The 2 shields on the lock, not ideal, but a nice bonus for Martyn of getting the 1 shield on the silencer might be important later on.
It was a slight miscalculation on my part to boost in and not have the focus. Just misjudged the distance slightly.
Yeah, just didn't think he could catch you.
Yeah. And
that is, as we've said on a number of videos now, in Vassal in particular, it's obviously relearning all those ranges. And it is a tricky thing to get. We're all getting slightly better as we play. The one interesting thing there was, Nic, after you moved Backdraft, you barrel rolled him to the right. I think I was kind of expecting barrel roll to the left. That would have bumped Captain Phasma, but you are a little bit jammed up by that debris now. What was your kind of thought process with the barrel roll?
So if I stay on the outside, I was a bit worried about where the hard 2 would end me up, and it would have left me potentially blindsided by the ships that were coming in. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to be able to again just threaten, and if Backdraft takes a couple of shots, as long as you're able to get some decent damage output in return. The whole thought was, if I can trade Backdraft for some heavy damage into some of his ships, it's possible for the 2 fast ships, so the Silencer and the Provocateur, can actually take on a lot of these ships if they can get rid of at least some of the firepower and dodge some of the arcs. So I don't mind trading even 2 of my SFs for the 2 medium-based ships. With the maneuverability on the other 2, they can actually handle it. So being able to get in there and have a nice position for Backdraft this turn was something that I was kind of aiming for.
That's a really nice kind of thing to know, is that you have plans that are developed on the fly. So I think I agree with you that you're going to, with your list, you've got the kind of more aggressive half of it with the SFs that you can afford to lose if they do enough damage, and then your kind of more end game ships although they're not very high PS, they are the more agile, more high agility ships. So I kind of think it's a good thing for people to kind of pick up on, is you need a plan, right? And almost any plan is better than nothing. I think that's a reasonable plan, but having a target choice, something to focus on, it informs all your decision making and means that it makes it a little bit easier. You know what you're doing, and you're not going into every turn thinking, like, oh God, what the hell do I do now? It's always like, okay, so what's the next part of plan to trade the SFs for the medium bases? So we've got a few dials going down here, and I'm going to pause the video here. We've seen the first move from Martyn, or the first couple of moves, with the silencer continuing to kind of come around the corner, got the gas cloud as protection there and ready to turn in next turn, and just a sort of predictable, I think, 2 hard in from the Fang fighter to kind of pressure Nic's list. Lloyd, what if you're Martyn here? What are you looking at? Kind of what are you expecting? Where do you think
you always ask me about the faction? I'm not thinking about that point.
Okay, so go from Nic then. We'll give you the easier choice.
So I was actually looking at the SFs. So in terms of Martyn's list, there's nothing that stands out as being particularly scarier than anything else, with one exception, which I'll come back to. Right. So you've got a lot of kind of beefy things. Even the Kirax is kind of moderately beefy. Right. It's basically an X-wing. The medium base ships are probably the things that are easiest to give up MOV, but the thing that scares me most is probably the Fang, because it has that defensive ability, because it has 3 agility. And the way I would look at it actually is the SFs are perfect for countering that. In that if the Fang is chasing anything of your list or jousting to anything of your list, it's a real problem. But if it's chasing the SFs, it's actually perfect because that's the point at which it doesn't get its ability. So I would be looking to trade Backdraft and or Phasma for the Fang and something, because the Fang is the thing that scares me for the rest of my AC sort of what is it, a silencer and a Baron? Tie Baron, right?
Yeah, Tie Baron.
Yeah, so I would probably be looking at either a 2-turn away here from Backdraft to turn my rear arc onto the Fang, knowing that it was going to turn in this turn, or a 3-bank to kind of go past it, but that risks Backdraft taking a lot of damage. So I think for me here, a 2-turn away from Backdraft and getting quality shots into that Fang is definitely where I'd be looking to go, because then again, next turn the Fang has almost no choice but to come towards you again.
Yeah, it's going to be pinched. It's sort of pinched in between those two obstacles there, and as you say, I think it's obviously we've got a little bit more information than the guys had planning their moves, but the moves that have happened so far, I think, have been fairly predictable. The Fang unlikely with the low initiative to kind of commit hard to the edge of the board, and the silencer having to just come around the corner and stay there in the defensive position. I agree with you. The turn away from Backdraft looks nice, and it has the added advantage I think you alluded to of the turn in is the more aggressive move, but it's going to trigger the Concord Dawn, and you're going to be in a lot of other arcs. So the turn away looks good. I think my only slight issue with the turn away is are you flying your list off in different directions? But actually, given the position, you've got quite nice option for kind of continuing to run away the turn after, or the hard turn right to get back into the position that the Baron currently is in, which is not bad. I think that the choices with Phasma and with the Baron are slightly more tricky. The Baron's looking like it's going to take a fair bit of heat potentially if it does anything other than kind of hard disengage. And Phasma, you kind of like the 2-bank or the 3-bank seem like they're the kind of reasonable choices. You could, if you bring Backdraft, the alternative would be to hard 2 Backdraft in towards the Fang and then hard 2 Phasma to sort of follow up, then having sort of weight of fire into that Fang and knowing that at least one of those ships is going to be at the kind of dreaded range 2 to sort of scare the Fang. And I don't know if that gives you better options with Phasma for next turn. I think, yeah, assuming from Martyn that you just wheel everything in, right? So you kind of 3-bank the Seek, 2-bank the Cartel Executioner, 1 or 2-bank the Cartel Marauder, and then whatever the biggest turn is on that Havoc to get it out of the way. I think you just accept the gas cloud with the 2 medium-based ships.
Pretty much. I was looking at like for the Lot Revenant, I think he's in the wrong way for the other 3 ships, and it's sort of like I can either get him straight to make space for the others, but then he's just getting in the way of the Seek then. So it's the idea is then, like you say, if unless I turn them in, the 2 medium-based ships have got to go straight, and then they're not going to have guns on this turn, potentially, just because of the position of the rest of his ships coming round towards the side. So I think the turns here is I'm thinking I've just got to take the gas cloud. Maybe if I land on it, I could use it to my advantage, so long as I don't get strained.
Yeah, because it's an interesting one, right? Because gas clouds, the least sort of punishing, if you like, of obstacles to go across, with lots of caveats attached to that sentence. But for an for an agility 1 ship, it's almost meaningless, right? Like, yes, it turns off your modifications, but the difference of 1 agility across 2 or 3 shots is basically nothing.
And what you already saw in the opening engage, when Backdraft has a 3 dice, I have 3 agility dice through the gas cloud, and I just get all blanks.
True, yeah.
But Lloyd's point is a really reasonable one, right? So in general, the higher agility ships are much more reliant on their agility dice. So,
yes, certainly.
Yeah, taking a strain on a Fang or an Ace is not equivalent to taking it on a I don't know what it is. What's it called? The Cartel Executioner.
Gila.
Thank you.
This is the top level X-Wing knowledge that you're tuning in for, guys.
There are 3 ships called Cartel something in this.
Yes.
I had to rename all the target locks something else because they were just CE, CM, and it was just like, no, can't deal with that.
So I think if I'm Nic, probably played more conservatively, and I think that I'd turn away and disengage with the Baron, maybe even sort of 5 straight Phasma for the same reason, to try and sort of spend another turn getting around into the side of Martyn's list. My idea is that Martyn's coming into the obstacles here. The longer you leave it before you engage, the more of a mess Martyn is likely to have got himself into. You do risk taking sort of unreturned fire doing that. So before we go back to the game, Nic, why don't you tell us what's sort of running through your head, that kind of choice between being aggressive or running away? Were you considering them both?
Running away at this point of the game when it's coming to the open engages is not massively my sort of tactic. I tend to sounds like a weird one, particularly talking to likes of you and Lloyd, Paul, is that I tend to trust my dice, and they tend to pull me out of a lot of scrapes. They just tend to work that way.
Veteran Instincts does not endorse this message.
I'm well aware it doesn't. But one of my thoughts was, particularly with the provocateurs, if I take a turn and disengage with him, with the speed, they're not the fastest ships, but where they would be for Martyn's ships, to kind of come around that gas cloud again and get back into the fight would take quite a bit of time, and that's a lot of time where he's punching damage into the SFs. Mm-hmm. So if he takes them off quickly without me getting enough damage into his ships, that's a problem for me.
That's a very point, right? Because you're looking at it as a damage race, and so you're trading the SFs, trading up for the SFs, so you're getting rid of something that is a bigger issue for you in exchange.
Yeah.
So you want to have all of your guns firing as much as possible.
Yes. Which is where so just to turn before we pause the video, the Martyn and I actually spoke about it during the game, was the silencer could have done the hard one, as you alluded to, but would have kept the stress. And I was quite worried that potentially Martyn would see that and the Fang would just come after the silencer with no mods. And that would have been a sad day for the silencer, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and that's a real 50-50, isn't it? Like you say, you could have turned in and it would have been beautiful given that Martyn is committed to the centre of the board. But the upside of the unmodded shot into the Fang is minimal. You maybe do 1 or 2 damage. And the downside of Martyn calling that and evaporating your silencer is huge.
It goes against the game plan.
Yeah, I think that's the correct choice. And that's really interesting. So I think that's a really solid point to take away. And again, it's that sort of, commitment to your game plan. You've got a game plan and you're sticking to it. And that I think may well turn out to be the correct decision. We'll find out. But for people sort of sat at home watching, my plan of disengaging would be a kind of departure from Nic's game plan going in. And I think that you should always be open to changing your plans given on what the board state looks like. But it's a decision that you need to think about, right? That the risk here of trying to run away and trying to turn away is that you leave 1 or 2 ships trapped. And exactly as Nic says, that rather than getting an engagement where Martyn is taking a lot of incoming fire, has difficult choices into, does he shoot the more tanky ships that will take some damage but probably stay alive, or does he take the shots into the high agility ship that might blow up or might take nothing? Which would be a total disaster for him. Give him that difficult choice rather than give him the obvious choice of, well, I'm going to shoot the 1 ship that I have available to shoot at. That ship takes a load of damage, and then Nic's looking at 3 ships versus 5 instead of 4 ships versus 5.
And so, Nic, as these dials are revealed and these ships move in, talk me through a little bit about, is there a ship in your list that you feel is the most valuable? And then does that factor into Captain Phasma and her ability?
For me, actually, the Provocateur is probably one of the best ships in the list. Sure. Because it is essentially an ace in this list in particular. We can just see a snapshot coming off here as well, which I can't remember. It might do something. But it's just so maneuverable, and being able to get the 4 dice on target double modded by itself without any external help from any of the other ships in the list means it can still punch well above its weight. So for me, keeping that alive and kind of keeping that where I want it to be punching is quite important for me in general.
So does that mean in return you're trying to keep Phasma away from it?
Not necessarily. In fact, I think there is a point later on where I have to use it. It might be this game. I can't remember. But I tend not to worry about her ability too much. If it happens, it happens. Because taking damage on another ship can sometimes be absolutely fine, and actually keeping her alive can keep her alive that little bit longer, because she does become a target.
So again, Phasma's relatively new in the game. Her ability is that after she takes damage, is it a may or a must? I think
it's a must.
Yeah. After she takes damage, a friendly ship at range 0 to 1 must take a hit or a crit to cancel that result. So it's sort of enforced reverse selflessness, really, or enforced selflessness for other ships. I know it's one of those. So it's potentially helpful in that it spreads damage out across the list, but potentially damaging that it might be an easy way to put damage into a higher agility ship. But I think it's one of those abilities that messes with your opponent's decision making, and I really like those. It gives your opponent the ability to make a bad choice. So whilst that's been going on, we saw Martyn taking the strain from going over that gas cloud into snapshot range, and therefore takes one hit with no agility, and is down to one shield before the start of the second engagement.
I think we actually worked out that because they both trigger after, because it works out during the maneuver step, you take the strain. That was the only reason we worked it out.
Yeah. So the strain goes down first, I think. Yeah. So the strain's still on the board, but it should have come off, and I think
that's a stress.
That's a stress. Okay, perfect. And yeah, wow, you've gone really aggressive there with a TIE Baron, and got him really stuck in.
Yeah.
Martyn wheeling around as we expected. And Martyn, the snapshot we sort of didn't really take into account with the planning moves. Was that something you were worried about? Something you just sort of had to accept, and you've got quite beefy ships. Could you kind of just accept it and move on, or did you kind of think about what was happening?
It was just sort of, it's going to trigger at some point. I need to make sure I've got, let's say, got the guns on target. If it goes in, so long as it's really not going into my better ship, like we've already said, is the Fang. If it goes onto the larger base ships, okay, yeah, they're less agility, more likely to do damage. Doesn't help, obviously, if you've got a strain token when it snapshots you. But yeah, it was just sort of, it's going to come. I'd probably forgotten about it at that point, to be honest, because I just kind of thought, I don't know, I've just got to get my guns around. And then, yeah, say having the strain token when he decided to snapshot it probably wasn't the greatest choice, but oh well.
So we've got the first few shots coming here. I think this is backdraft into the Fang. And so while we watch these trays of fire, we'll kind of sum everything up towards the end. Lloyd, Martyn's saying there that he'd probably forgotten the snapshot, and you know that's a weakness of my game, is forgetting bits of my opponent's lists or bits of my list at key moments. It's something that you don't tend to do. Have you got an approach? Is there anything that you do that you think other people could do to kind of help them to remember that stuff? Like remember there's a snapshot on your opponent's list?
I think it does depend. It depends a little bit on what you're running, certainly. So I think if I was in Martyn's case, I would have it less at the front of my mind because everything is quite beefy and tanky, or at least the medium ships are, which are the things he's sort of bringing into that area. I do tend to, I think it's more a case of my brain works that way than a specific thing, but I do tend to make a point of sort of speaking aloud and talking through my opponent's list at the start of the game. And then anything that I'm likely to forget, I'll say a couple of times just to kind of get it stuck in my head a little bit. And then again, as we're kind of coming into engagements, because quite often a game, as we've seen here, we'll have a couple of turns of positioning and before we get to shots. As we so every couple of turns, I'll look across again at my opponent's cards and remind myself of what they have and the things I'm likely to forget. So it's just that constant kind of reminding yourself and rechecking to make sure that the things that are then going to catch you out don't catch you out.
And we're seeing here a succession of very poor attack dice into just about acceptable evade dice. So far, nothing's taken a significant amount of damage. The Lock Revenant has had one more shield chipped onto it, but everything else has got away unscathed. And there's now some potentially big hits coming in here. 2 hits from the Kimagila onto Backdraft, I think this is. Or
Yes,
yeah,
On the Provocateur, so saved by the gas cloud because I can't use focus for dead to reds.
And why 3 attack rather than 4 attack there? Was that just a mistake?
Must just be a mistake, unless it's a mistake and you're bringing it over through.
No, that's the video. So.
Oh. Then yeah, I guess I let Nick off then.
Well, let's hope that doesn't come back to haunt you.
Yeah.
Well, I remember at this sort of stage, I was quite happy to a point with the engagement because I knew I had at least 3 range 1s onto this Provocateur with, well, supposed to be 4 attack dice. And as you can see from that roll, it's going really well.
Nothing, yeah.
So you have chipped a damage through with the Kimagila, even with 3 dice, which I think Nick chose to take because sort of he wanted to keep the focus for future defense rolls. The Cartel Marauder there really not helping with 1 crit from 4 dice, and the Lock Revenant not doing a great deal better with 1 hit. And so Nick, I think, in hindsight, could have not taken that damage, I think, but a reasonable choice to keep the focus with 8 more dice coming in on him. And I think we have the Seek and the Fang here to round out the turn.
I think, so we blew through that combat phase fairly quickly, but I think, Martyn, did the Lock Revenant shoot at Backdraft instead? Because at that point, the Baron still had its focus. Was that right? It looked like Nick rolled 2 defense dice.
I think so. I think at this point, I've decided because the Baron's just avoided everything, I think because with the Iron Cannon, the Fang, and the Lock Revenant, I've just decided to change targets now to Backdraft.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important thing that is very easy to miss, right? Is that you went into this round of combat with a plan, like saying, I have 3 range 1 shots into this Baron. I've got a real chance to cause it some serious hurt or maybe just outright kill it. And then you take your first 2 shots and you've done essentially nothing. At which point the 3rd shot now isn't a kill shot, now it's a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
And so changing that plan and going, well, I can shoot now at the ship instead that has less agility and I'm more likely to put damage in is, again, a really sensible decision. It's really easy to miss, and it's something that newer players will quite often get wrong because you'll go into a combat round with a plan and you'll stick to that plan regardless of what's happened with the dice results. And being able to have that flexibility is actually really key.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's something we've spoken about before, right? Just constantly reassess. This game is really fluid. Things change from moment to moment. And if you have the mental energy to do it, you need to be constantly reassessing your choices. So absolutely right. Martyn there flipping to the target, which he has now, including the lock, which he's chosen. He's changed his target priority with 3 shots coming into Backdraft. Lock itself and the Seek pretty disappointing, but the Fang at least doing some work and chipping 2 shields off Backdraft there.
I think we also missed at the start of that engagement was, I think, remember Nick's plan was Backdraft was supposed to at least strip the Fang's focus and maybe get a damage card through with his 4 dice attack for Phasma's concussion missiles to try and pull their weight. But again, with the, as we saw from the start with the way the dice went, just no one's dice were pretty much helping either of us out in that turn.
I think there was a 2 damage total in the entire combat phase, if I remember. Or 1 or 2 damage total across the entire combat phase.
Yeah, certainly given the proximity of all the ships to each other, not a lot of damage done. So talking about how the game is fluid and that you constantly need to reassess. Because of that, particularly from Martyn's point of view, I presume we're expecting more damage to be traded there. What's the plan now? You've had that round 1. You were hoping for something to either be dead or very nearly dead. That hasn't happened. You're arguably now in a slightly tricky position from a maneuver point of view. Why don't we hit pause again here, and we'll talk through this turn, and we'll let the game flow a bit more after that. But I think these are kind of key turns in the open engagement. So, Martyn, we've paused the game here. It looks, with the majority of your ships moving first, that you don't have a lot of places to go. what are you thinking here? Are you worried? What's the plan in terms of sort of where your ships go and what the target sort of choices are for next turn?
Well, as we were just sort of saying about, I'd hoped to have put at least a bit more damage, at least maybe have got through the shields of the TIE Barons, so that I could at least force it to maybe disengage or not still be as threatening as it could be. So as for positions, like you say, it's a bit cluttered. The Fang is the one thing I really want to make sure it still has an action, but again, it doesn't have a great deal of choice apart from really the 2 straight, but which could still be blocked by the silencer. Trying to think as well for his positions with his SFs, with having the mobile firing arc, they're most likely just going to try and either go straight and then rotate their arcs. So it was just trying to sort of position myself with shots on things, expecting maybe things to keep going straight, but the medium bases, again, not being able to really turn around. So I think they kind of have to sort of car park the middle a bit, try and leave a bit of space maybe for the Cartel Marauder to come around, and the Fang maybe now has to then change targets again and try and go back for either Captain Phasma or the Silencer.
So we're looking at a 2 straight from that Fang and kind of hoping that the Silencer hasn't come in to block it.
Yes, I think that is. I expecting the Silencer maybe to do a 2-turn, and then we can either have a range 1. Whether a 2 straight will still have a chance to fit, but he needs to stay in the fight, and the only other option is a 2-turn, and then he's not going to have any shots on anything anyway. So
yeah. So as you say, the 2 bank out to the left is going to take him out of the fight. The 2 turn out to the left is going to take him out of the fight and facing the gas cloud next turn, and the 2 hard in right fits, but is unlikely to have a shot on anything, given that the best you achieve there is bumping the TIE Baron. So yeah, I think I agree with that. But he's just going to have to accept that he might be blocked. But if he is, he's only taking a couple of shots. There's an opportunity here. So TIE SFs are interesting ships with that mobile firing arc, and this applies to the A-wings as well, which I think are sort of more commonly seen in the meta. Where at the moment Nic has the arcs forward on both, and the reason for that is that with the Special Forces gunner, that gives him his 3 dice base out of the front. And for Phasma, without the Special Forces gunner, usually those ships are sat with the rear arc facing backwards for the whole game. But it's the mobile arc that the missiles are fired from. There's the opportunity here to block backdraft and keep his arc forward, and therefore keep him from firing this turn. And the Seek looks like the kind of candidate to be able to do that. Were you considering that, or is backdraft at this point, does he have too many options for his manoeuvres with kind of straights and banks, and it's too high risk to do that?
I mean, I think it's a bit of both, because like you say, you can either just go straight and rotate, but he also has the opportunity to 3 sloop here and keep his arc forwards and bring it back in with Special Forces gunner. It kind of keeps backdraft's ability either side. So it was sort of, do I try and block it, or do I just make sure that I've maybe got position on other things?
It's a big gamble, right, for a ship that has this entire dial open to it to call a specific maneuver.
And as I say, I think I was also still more concerned about the TIE Baron at this point with its 5k, because that was the ship that I was, I think, initially going for. It was, if I can pin that down, the SFs I know where are going to be. It's trying to just lock down these maneuverable ships.
Nic, from your point of view, Martyn's mentioned the 5k. That looks like a good way to get the Baron safe and still with shots. Anything short looks like you're likely to be bumping. What are your thoughts in terms of your SS and the Baron?
I mean, there was no other maneuver going on the Baron. That was it. Where his ship is, it can't be there. It's not going to end up there, so I can be there safely. I mean, sometimes the obvious move is still the right one. I remember taking a long time looking at the dials on this one when it comes to the SFs, because I was doing a lot of maths, in all honesty. I was trying to work out where I can put backdraft and still have Phasma jump over and again try and not be shot. And that was a lot of thinking, and that is, again, the whole... So with the game plan of just keeping guns on target with mods to try and do the damage, obviously. And if they lose a couple of shields and a couple of damage here and there from the bigger ships. As long as they punch hard enough, it's not that much of an issue. So
it sounds like you're kind of playing for the 2 straight from that Fang and hoping to hop Phasma over the top of it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Basically, which then gives you the rear arc, which the Fangs hate because they're going to turn off that Concord.
I think that's what I did, if I remember.
And then from that point of view, then with the silencer, then you probably don't want to block because you don't want to make it harder to get over the top of the Fang. So what's your idea with the silencer here?
I think I definitely do the 2 hard. I think I can't remember if I do the straight boost or not. I was contemplating if the barrel would fit, which I know it doesn't now looking at it again. I think I end up just focusing, but honestly I can't remember. But it was just kind of keep somewhere roughly in the way, but not block it so much that Phasma ends up getting stopped.
So let's restart the action there. And so Lloyd, at this point in the game, who's your money on? Who do you think's has anyone got the upper hand? Obviously a bit of a weird engagement there with very little damage done.
Yeah, it's still in a really interesting position, right? Because you still have. So I really love the position the SFs are in because, as I say, they have their entire dial open, and so they're in. Well, so Backdraft certainly does. Phasma's slightly more limited, but they're in positions where they're going to almost certainly get actions and get shots, whereas a lot of Martyn's list isn't. But Martyn's list is beefy and is built to trade blows with things, and all it needs is 1 or 2 good shots to go into something, and it makes a huge amount of difference very quickly. So I think from a combat phase last round where both lists were a bit disappointing in what they did, I think we're actually still in a really kind of finely balanced place.
So yeah, Nick, remembering correctly, the 2 hard in and the focus there, and that's right. And the boost. That's interesting.
Yeah, I can remember.
And so
I remembered you did the boost.
And so that's an interesting one, right? Because that's done 2 things. So it's blocked this Fang, obviously removing its actions, which is good. But it does mean that by look of things, that Phasma's now going to end up in front of it or bumped into it, rather than hopping over the top to sort of turn on that rear arc. Also, bringing the silencer in there puts it closer to, and therefore taking more dice from Martyn's heavy hitters should he choose that as a target. Sort of looking back on that, do you think that you could have done that differently, or are you happy with the choice to boost there, and if so, for what reason?
I think I might clear because I think I do if I remember rightly, I think I do the 5 straight on Phasma.
Okay.
Pretty sure it clears over the top.
Over top everything. Okay.
Martyn,
so in that case, you've got the bump, and then you've taken away the focus and kept him a bit nearer. Mm-hmm.
So the 5 forward, if it fits, is going to be beautiful because it's very close.
Yeah, so you had a snapshot coming in there onto the Seek, which chips 1 damage in, so it took the shield off the Seek. So that's sort of staying relevant. Martyn doing a nice job of making space for that Kirax to turn in. I think that was a lovely spot for the Kirax to be in, to get the Kirax actions there and to have the arc sort of swung around is, I thought it was quite a good achievement when I was watching this the first time through. And then the Kimagila, presumably not going very far, hoping to get its nose over the front edge of that gas cloud, so it's not giving the things it's shooting at the defensive bonus.
With the Kirax, it was the only thing I thought I could still put pressure on with the TIE Baron. So I thought if I can make sure I've got the space to give it its action, like you say, it is the only thing that can have the shot on it.
And so, as Lloyd was saying, you've got a limited number of mods here, but you are rolling a lot of dice, and what you need at this point is a few good natural rolls into those high agility ships, and it sort of starts to swing the game in your favour. And we'll see what happens up with the SFs here. So, backdraft going quickly, and then we shall see if the 5 straight does fit. Then Nick's looking in a nice position here, and it does, beautifully judged. I'd have been worried about that. And so, going into this combat phase, I think you've got to be much happier if you're Nick rather than Martyn. That silencer looks like it could be in trouble, taking an awful lot of fire, but the other ships in Nick's list only taking the 1 shot between the 3 of them from the Kirax, all at range. And Martyn's got some very nice shots in here into the Fang if he chooses to take them.
Yeah, it's a sad blocker, isn't it? That's sitting there in front of Martyn's entire list.
Yes. But at this point, the trade is reasonable. You know, you could, with the unmodded shots, you've got half a chance of getting out of this with an alive silencer. And if you, especially if Martyn's able to PS kill the Fang, then those chances go up hugely. So the choice here between going into the Fang and continuing to fire at the Lock Revenant, I presume you go into the Fang here.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I took the Lock. I couldn't pass up the shots that I have in the Fang when he has no Concordia. It just didn't seem sensible to do.
And so obviously this turn you don't have concussion missiles, so the order of backdraft and plasma firing doesn't matter to you. Neither of them have any shots coming in, I don't think.
So Nic sort of averaged, maybe slightly under average there, 2 hits from his single modded attack, and Martyn getting the 2 evades on defense there to kind of stay alive. Again, slightly under average there with the 2 Tyson 4 hits, and again another 2 natural evades from this Fang.
I think
That's
that was
the
into the
Seek, I
Seek.
think, yeah.
Because I had the
That's
4
the
dice,
Seek.
I opted to go into the Seek.
Okay.
And I knew that the Baron had a shot on there as well. I wasn't sure that the Baron had the shot on the Fang.
So, and the Seek finally taking some damage there, down to 1 health. But again, I think it's slightly disappointing damage output. And another example of what Lloyd was talking about earlier with sort of decision-making influenced. I'm sure, Nic, had you done sort of 2 or 1 or 2 damage into the Fang with that first shot, then the backdraft decision, you know, you might follow up. But with the Fang evading everything, the first one, you switch to the Seek.
Yes.
King Magilla this time rolling the correct amount of dice. Nic deciding to spend to avoid taking any damage there.
It was a case of the eyeballs were there. There's no guarantee that they come up again. That was literally the reason behind that one.
And then yet more poor attack dice. 1 hit from 4, evaded by the silencer.
I'm going to make a prediction here, and I'm going to say this game might go to time.
Certainly with nothing taking any damage. The Kirax here has a choice, and I think. Did you go at the Tie Baron here, Martyn?
Yeah, I think it was always going for Tyrone, especially with no mods. But as you can see from those dice rolls, he didn't need them.
Trust in the dice sometimes.
Yeah, wowzers.
I have to.
Right.
I can't win anyway.
Normally I do.
So now we have all the I1s. So are you shooting at the Seek kicks as 1 health or the Lock because you can put a lot of damage into it?
I think I put it into the Lock because I can put the damage in.
Sure.
Or potentially put the damage in because I've got 4 dice. I think that was my call, and the Seek still had a focus token.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think I would have chosen the Seek because I think you either kill it, which is good, or you strip the focus, which.
I mean, you can see from the screen that's what I'm looking at, so I can't.
Yeah. We'll know by the number of dice rolled, but given how the dice have gone
at the
so far, it's irrelevant. So this is at the Lock, right? You roll the 4 dice and do another 2 damage. And so the Lock's starting to take a bit of damage here. That's it. Sort of getting towards half points. In fact, it's at half now. It's and the only remaining shots I think are into the silencer. So this is the way it sort of has this turn been good for Nic or a total disaster is basically all down to does the silencer take a significant amount more damage here. And a good roll for once there from the Seek. Not enough evades, and so that silencer takes a damage from the Iron Cannon turret and an Ion. Still to face the Zealous Recruit shot, and is now looking a little bit sad. No defensive tokens left, and down to 4 health. Oof, and a good hit there from an unmodded Fang. And another hit crit going through. And so, pretty even in terms of volume of damage done. But I think that Nic's taken it on the higher agility target. And I think for me, Martyn's come out of that slightly better in terms of points and damage done, but maybe in a worse position in terms of where his ships are and where they're going next turn. What are your thoughts, Lloyd?
My main thought was actually thinking back to that boost from the silencer. We didn't stop to have a look at it, but had it not boosted, would it actually have bumped the Fang? I think it might well have, right?
Oh no, I don't know. I think
I
without
didn't actually look at it too much at the time.
No, I think without the boost, I think the Fang is sat at range 1 in front of it with a focus taken, and
Okay.
although it's further away from everything else, it's in a bad position. I think Nic in a slightly tricky position here now that the SFs are somewhat heading out of the fight. The Baron pointing towards Martyn's list, but with limited options of where to go. Lots of its moves in to continue firing are eminently blockable.
And Martyn, for you, so this is your sort of car park that you've built. You've got a bit of flexibility in terms of initiative of which ships are going to clear the fight and which ships are then going to come and get actions, or whether you want to just bump everything in and take out the silencer. What are you looking at in terms of which ships you want to have shots and which ships you want to block with?
Well, because knowing that the silencer is going to be ironed, I think the Fang was always going to 4K behind, because just make sure I get the shot. The range 1, hopefully he can do damage there. The Lot Revenant doesn't really have much options, so I'm pretty sure I'm thinking maybe hard 3 him out, just get him out of the way, so that I've got a bit of space maybe for the Kimagila to come round and maybe get an action. The Seek on 1 health has been a pretty difficult spot. There wasn't really much space to go, so I just thought, turn him out of there, risk the debris. There's only potentially 1 shot going to come towards him, but again, it's another shot onto the silencer if I need it. And
it's an iron cannon, right? So as we've already seen, like every now and then when those iron cannons hit, they are devastating for ships.
Yes,
because it gives you so much control.
Definitely. Oh, so here I talon rolled rather than 3-turned, just again to keep the arcs from the Lot Revenant on point with the dorsal
really like
turret.
And
Nick, how are you feeling? Yeah, how do you get yourself out of the situation?
I mean, I was lucky there that the 2 straight from the Baron didn't bump. I think it was pretty close in that he didn't quite block that, so I'm not feeling too bad with him. Backdraft, I didn't really feel like sending him all the way out to the edge to come back in. I wanted him to be able to have his actions and be able to get back with some more mods. So I'm pretty sure I opt to just hard turn and take locks here, and I might even take a focus because of that dorsal turret. It forces me to take the focus, I'm pretty sure, in a second, rather than take the lock. But I want to just be able to get back around, and this is a turn of repositioning for the ships that I have. I'm convinced that I'm going to lose the silencer at this point, but as I still have 2 healthy SFs, the plan's kind of switched the other way now, which is just everything that can do damage can keep itself alive and do damage as best as possible. That's kind of where we've ended up. So that's kind of what I'm playing towards.
So Nick, kind of with most of your list here, is just kind of taking a turn out to reset. Really, you're gonna have a couple of shots, but thinking about the turn after and what you're gonna do, and that's, I think, valuable advice for any newer player. Once you're in a scrum, and particularly like this situation where there's a lot of ships still on the board, the game hasn't really gone how anyone expected it, with the kind of disappointing attack dice from both sides. You need to. The temptation is to kind of keep firing. Just like, what can I do to keep my arc on this round? What can I do to keep my arc on this round? We saw it in the very first episode of Veteran Instincts with Ben flying the Jump Master, and every turn got worse and worse shots as he kind of drifted out the fight. And he sort of picking that moment to take a turn off, to sacrifice shots this turn for better position next turn is kind of judging when to do that is a real important skill the next turn.
I thought that was very much turn this turn, because I knew Phasma could still get her because of the rear arc, as we've talked about, the concussion missiles and the damage cards being on the Loch Revenant. There was a chance that I could just, a fairly strong chance that I could just take it off the board. But But with Backdraft, there was no way, without him continually going out of the fight, there was no way that I could keep the shots on.
Yeah. And continuing the theme, Phasma there rolling the concussion missiles, rolling 3 blanks into 2 eyeballs and a hit. But thankfully, the lock does roll a blank, so it takes the damage from the concussion and flips one of its crits to take a wounded pilot. But again, disappointing damage output there from a single modded 3 dice attack.
I don't think the Lock Revenant has rolled any evades at this point of the game so far.
No, yeah, pain.
It's not perhaps there too, but yeah, even still.
Exactly. I wasn't expecting it to. I thought it might maybe roll a bit more than it did, but
it's always the one, right? Like you should have taken the damage there, and you should have flipped a card. But seeing the one hit coming in, you think, oh, there's a chance.
But he shouldn't have taken the one through the gas cloud, to be fair.
Yes, that's true. We got a Baron shot coming in here. Gets the 2 hits, and I think that is a dead seek.
Yes.
Yep.
So 1 evade, not enough. And the first ship off the board, finally, after 3 rounds of trading fire. Presumably to be followed up, although this Sinar only taking a couple of shots, but no mods all round, so you're expecting this to die at this point. So it looks like in bullseye, so can't spend the tokens it doesn't have. And potentially at range 1, yeah. And so 2 hits, they're kind of average, not bad. And chips another damage through, leaving that on 1 health. The Lock Revenant Talon roll was really nice, right? It would have been easy to not have that firing this turn, and actually now you have a choice of targets. And with the 180 firing arc, it sort of gives you a really nice spread. As Nick said, it's already forced Backdraft to take the focus rather than getting a target lock for next turn. And I think as a result of that, you take the shot into Phasma here, and so that's 3 into 2 rather than 2 into 2. Get a mighty 1 hit, but it doesn't matter because you've the 1 evade, so no damage done on that turn. Range 1 shot coming in from the Kirax here, so this will be 4 dice into 2 dice with a focus into no mods. You're going to expect some damage here. Gets 2 hits, which with a focus I think is again slightly under average, not way off, but very slightly, which has been the theme of the game. And Phasma rolling 1 evade there, so taking a hit. And this is the point at which Phasma's ability hurts Nick a bit. What ends up happening here is that Backdraft is just out of range, and the First Order Provocateur is just in. So Nick forced to take the shields to half the First Order Provocateur. Obviously, would much rather taken that on Phasma at that point, who is fully healthy. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. And Martyn managing to damage the ship, which is directly behind the one he was shooting with.
Yes. It's only the second time in 4 games that it's triggered.
Is that because people are ignoring Phasma, or
a bit of both, I think, positioning and just Phasma being ignored a bit.
And so a bit of sort of strangeness from Vassal here. I think the shot in from the Kimagila was a range 1 shot, and it's saying the return shot is range 2. And I think you guys decide to hand wave it and say that this is indeed a range 1 shot here from the Simar. And that looks like it's 1 crit, but the Executioner was strained from going over that cloud for about the 4th turn in a row, and so took the 1 damage as a shield. And then this is the potential kill shot here. Oof, but only 1 hit rolled. And evaded, and so unlikely as it is, that Silencer lives to see another turn, and that feels enormous. Lloyd, what are your thoughts?
I think we've been doing a lot of kind of taking lessons from games, and I think a lot of the stuff we've talked about has been quite kind of high level and quite interesting and quite new to perhaps newer players. I think what we're getting here is a reminder that modifying dice is generally good.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, and that is a real key point, right? You can look at this in one of 2 ways. I think you could, Martyn's takeaway from this game could be, oh Christ, my attack dice were terrible. I I think that would be forgetting Nic's dice, which have been almost as poor. But it's also a pointless takeaway, right? You can't do anything about that. You can't make yourself roll better dice. So the takeaway needs to be, you need to go one step deeper and why were my attack dice so poor? And the answer is because Martyn has had very, very few mods over this game. Because of the number of ships on the board and the way he engaged, everything is possibly, as we said right back at that first turn. I hope you don't mind me saying, Martyn, is possibly everything's coming a bit too close together into a bit too tight a region of the board, leaving you with limited options. Do you think that's a fair comment?
I totally agree. I think I kind of clustered myself a bit too much, so there wasn't much manoeuvring space, and the gas cloud just being totally in the wrong space to give me mods on the two main ships. And I think like what you're saying with the mods was a theme for this game, because I think in the previous term with the two SFs shooting, I think with Phasma with the target lock rolled all eyeballs, and Backdraft with the focus rolled blanks.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So when you have had the mods, they've not been the correct ones, and that's tricky, and you can't really do anything about that. But yeah, definitely as a take home. I talked about this, but I think I cut it out of a previous video. One of the things that Lloyd and I did when we started to play X-Wing, I think one of the reasons that we've got to a point where I think we're reasonable players, is we would go to tournaments together and we'd drive back together, and we'd always debrief. And after a tournament, we'd run through the games. And Lloyd in particular was really hardcore about, we'd learn a lesson from each game, and the lesson could not be, I need my dice to roll better, and for everybody in every game, wins and losses, there is something you did wrong. There's a moment that you could have done better, and identifying that and identifying something that you can change. So not I wish I'd two-harded because that was turned out to be better in the 50-50, or I wish I'd rolled better dice at this moment. It needs to be, I should have done the 4 straight because that was always going to be their better move, or I should have my target priority was wrong, or yet again I forgot the bombs. I need to come up with a way of remembering that my opponent has bombs to drop. It sort of doesn't need to be a lot, but 1 or 2 lessons from each game you've played will really sort of accelerate that learning process and get you.
Absolutely. I remember in first edition, before bringing notes in or having notes was not allowed, we both had games where we would write things on the back of our hands. So every time we picked up a dial, you saw it. So it'd be things like, don't forget the bomb or something like this. Just as a way of making sure exactly that you don't forget something key that is going to cost you later on.
We're about to have one of the most important lessons in X-Wing, which is it's a game. And Martyn chose absolute massive sportsmanship here because I set my dial incorrectly. And we both realised that there is no way I was ever going to hard turn into that King Magila. And Martyn very, very kindly and very graciously says, no, take it back. Definitely do it. It's fine. I went, are you sure? And he said, yes, do it. It's why we play X-Wing. It's not always about the winning and the losing. It's about the enjoyment of the game and it being right. And Martyn shows, as I say, massive sportsmanship here and says, no, do what you were meant to do. And quite a pivotal turn for me, because that would have, I'm pretty sure, meant I was well out of position.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing there. So I was watching this, and you'd messaged me beforehand to sort of highlight that Martyn had done that, and you thought that was really good sportsmanship, and I agree, it is. And I was thinking, would I have done the same? And I think I came to the conclusion I probably would have done. Stuff like that in X-Wing, I think, is difficult. Anytime, within the rules of the game, as written in the book, you dialed in a maneuver, you did the wrong maneuver, you should have stayed there. I agree. There is no reason for you to choose that one hard, and then having chosen it, the obvious mistake is that you've gone the wrong way and you do the other one hard. So I think that's a pretty clear that where you are now is where you intended to be. But anytime you add in that kind of level of, this is sportsmanship, this is what should be done, it makes it a bit difficult, because it means that should a new player make the same decision. So I know, what do you think about that, Lloyd? Do you think that our advice would be if your opponent does that you always allow them to do it, that you have a hard and fast rule? What would you have done?
What I would have done is a different thing.
I mean, there's context though as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's a casual tournament. It's between two friends that know each other and know, that they're not the kind of people that are going to be cheating for an advantage. I'm saying this as I'm watching Backdraft Fire. I know, because I was going to say Backdraft Fire is 3 dice, but he has a special forces gunner. Okay, good. I'm glad you weren't cheating as we're talking about sportsmanship. It's a difficult one, isn't it? And it's because there are so many grey areas, and it's so impossibly difficult to get a very clear cut of what, if this is definitely misdialed or if this is definitely a mistake, then we can undo it. And because the way the world works, right, like you might do something that is very sporting and fair and get absolutely punished for it, because X-Wing is a dice game, and it's a game where, because you did the nice thing does not mean that you will be rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's even more reason to do it and to encourage it. But that's not to say that it is the default behaviour, right? Fly casual isn't let your opponent do whatever they want.
No, I totally agree. And had it been like a top cut of a system open or something, I'd be like, no, that's what you've dialed, unfortunately, at this stage. But in the casual tier event, it's not about all out winning. At least that's my take on it.
And we see the results there with having done the one hard, you then roll 4 hits into blanks, and so the ability triggering to keep the Zealous Recruit alive, but that Zealous Recruit that had prior to this turn been fully healthy now has 1 health left.
Yeah.
Imagilla trying to get the kill shot into the silencer here, and the silencer, Natty's out of it. The silencer's still alive. And that Lock Revenant left with only the range 2 dorsal turret. And again, without mods, not rolling any hits. So as you say, Nick, a really pivotal decision that Martyn now sat here with a 1 health ship where he could have had a full health ship. More unmodded, not particularly impressive dice from the Cartel Marauder.
Yes, it's the last time I let you off, Nick.
Yeah. And the Fang trying to get the kill shot in on this silencer.
And saying entirely in jest for newer players that are listening, but both players continuing to choose the wrong mods for their shots as well.
Yeah. So that was the silencer finishing off the Lock Revenant. So Martyn now 2 ships down. The silencer still sat on the board. I think there's a shot coming in here from the Fang onto the silencer. Yeah. And so 2 hits. Has the focus, could live, spends for 3. And blanks on that silencer is finally off the board. I think keeping Martyn in the game, I think had that lived for another turn, that really would have been it. But as it is, Nick, you have to be pretty happy with this. You've traded your I1 blocker for one of Martyn's big ships and also a kind of bonus cartel spacer.
Yeah, and the fact that I've put a lot of damage into the Fang as well, I was really lucky and really happy that the silencer was able to finish off the Lock Revenant. That was the big thing for me, that I've still got 2 very healthy ships, which can tank a lot of damage, and then the First Order Provocateur, which is on half but able to get away from things. He's in a position where he can just bug out if he needs to, or just get into the middle and tangle because he has that reposition as an extra action.
So I think circling back around to finish off the kind of comment about a good sportsmanship, I looked at it and I think I would have done it. For me, it was a situation where it was a fairly obvious mistake, and there was no great benefit to you. You hadn't gained any extra information over when you set the dial, given that it was clear what you were going to do. Yeah. And my advice to all players would be to have hard and fast rules about when you do it. I think what you want to try and do when making those decisions about whether to allow people to kind of undo mistakes is to not let the situation influence you. I don't think it's on if you're allowing people to fix mistakes early in the game when it really doesn't matter to you at all. But if they happen at a crucial moment, all of a sudden your rules are different. I think that is an unfair, in my opinion, way to play the game. I think you need to pick rules that you think are fair and stick to them rigidly, but also to understand that those rules aren't written down. So if your opponent has a different set of rules and they are hard and fast and do not allow the resetting of dials or anything, then that's fine. And that's how they've chosen to play the game. And it's not something you can get angry about. But I think that that's the kind of a happy medium between everybody being rules lawyery, letter of the law, and complete chaos where everyone's playing by a different set of rules and getting grumpy when people don't do the same. I think you have to have an internal kind of set of rules about when you allow things and when you don't, and then stick to them originally. And for me, that is, have you gained a significant advantage from the mistake, right? If you have forgotten to set a dial, if we catch that before anything's moved, cool, go ahead, set it. If half my list has moved, unfortunately, there's no way you can now fairly decide what your maneuver is. So you have to do the maneuver that's still on the dial from last round. That's how I play it. And I do try and sort of stick to that rigidly, no matter whether that's to my advantage or to my detriment.
And again, worth pointing out that, as you said, these things aren't written down, right? This isn't in the rules. So it's not like you as a player have to necessarily make that decision. If you feel unsure or you don't feel confident doing that, you can just call a judge. Obviously not in a vassal game, but in a regular tournament, you can just call the judge over and explain the situation and ask them to make a ruling.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So back to the game, we can see Martyn eschewing mods for yet another turn. Unfortunately, just bumping there with his Fang Fighter, allowing Nic to get a really nice one hardened barrel roll in to get a shot into the side of that, and taking the strain to do so. So we haven't really talked about the Thai Baron's ability. It can, after it maneuvers, take a strain or a deplete to take a target lock or a barrel roll. How have you been finding that, Nic, having flown this list a few times?
It's absolutely amazing. With Snapshot in particular, I said it kind of at the start. Choosing which token to take can be a little bit difficult, but with the Snapshot, I can err more towards, depending on when my opponent's ships are moving. If they're moving after me, I can err more towards the deplete and still have my full attack dice because I clear one with the Snapshot and just roll one attack dice and don't care about it, which clears the strain. Because
Which is a really nice trick, right? Perhaps quite an expensive trick at 7 points of Snapshot, but obviously in a list where this is the ship you've got, it's not a bad.
It's not something I would add to try and make it happen, but the fact that it's there has been a benefit to the list, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we've played. I know Martyn, Paul, and I have played in some various leagues where they have sort of nominated ships and pilots, and you end up flying things that you wouldn't usually, in the same way that I think Jank Tank works. And it is really interesting because every now and then you do stumble across something that you would never have built. And it doesn't necessarily end up being the final form of what you're doing, but it leads you down a different path and makes you look at list building in a different way and try something you would never normally put on the table.
Yeah.
And every now and then, just say you find something incredibly interesting.
Yeah, and one of the things we do in the 186 Squadron is try and keep an eye out for that. So, when you're in round 1 or 2, or you're having a bad day and you're on the bottom tournaments and you're running you're on the bottom tables and you're running into the more interesting lists, that's often the point at which you see maybe not a good list or sort of, as you say, the final formal idea, but something that sparks your imagination. And we've kind of got an informal list of stuff, for instance, Daredevil, BB-8 Poe, things like that you just look at and think, oh, that's a really nice trick. And it's good to kind of log those things. And then later on in a different list, after a few points changes, suddenly those old ideas kind of pop back up. And can become really, really valuable, really powerful pieces. So Nic here in a kind of taking a couple of unmodded shots, but in a much nicer point, putting a lot of damage into the Cartel Marauder there, taking it down to 1 health. I think passing up the shot on the Fang there, and can you talk us through sort of why you didn't take that kill shot on the Fang?
The simple answer: he has a loose stabilizer with 1 health.
And so you're just not worried about it.
So there's not really many places you can go, and Phasma's in a position to cover that arc. So I wasn't overly worried about it. My First Order Provocateur can also just do a 1 bank and sit in position to potentially be behind it. Not having the strain either, with a lock still. So again, it wasn't something that I was just concerned about, so I figured I'd punch some damage into the ships.
And as it is, the First Order Provocateur finishing the job and killing them.
Yeah, again, with the double mods, there was a fair chance of getting 4 damage, 4 hits rather, from the lock and focus.
So Martyn, in a bad position here, really needs to take out Backdraft here to have any chance of winning. Starts off well, gets a hit and a crit through. And so you do at least get the kill on Backdraft there, who took a direct there. But at this point, left with a quite healthy Castle Executioner, but versus two ships. And I think you guys sit and do points here. And you can see the Castle Executioner there at 42 points versus the full health Captain Phasma at 47 points. So even if Martyn were to kill the TIE Baron here, that's not enough points to win the game. And I think at this point, there are 2 turns left in the game.
Yeah, I think we just hit the 60-minute mark, so we have 2 more turns to go.
And so, always a good idea to kind of keep your win condition in mind. But at this point, Martyn has lost. There's no way that his Kima can catch Phasma. So unless Nic decides to turn in with Phasma, the game is done. So in terms of sort of lessons learnt from the game, maybe we start with Nic. What kind of was your take home from it? Obviously, you were playing this to practice for the Jank Tank game, I think later the same day. What kind of lessons did you learn about how the list flew and how to approach stuff?
So yeah, my main reason was, as you say, to practice for the Jank Tank, and it was just to remember my triggers and to get my maneuvers and get positions right and that sort of thing. Look at my dials, and I think that's quite an important thing. It is a good idea to put a list down, to put it on the table and get those reps in before you take it to a tournament, just to be familiar for yourself, because it makes it easier for you and your opponent. If you know your triggers and you can explain them, is quite a useful thing.
And Martyn, for you, thoughts on the list? Is this something that you would kind of, or something similar to something you'd run again, or is it kind of very much a one and done kind of failed experiment?
Probably more just sort of a one and done failed experiment. Like I said at the start, it was just trying to use some ships I don't normally use. As for lessons learnt from it, I think if I was to use it again, I would my starting setup, I'd space out the ships a lot more, so that I didn't end up in quite such a tight car park in about the 3rd or 4th turn to be all clustered together, and at least then the fan across, if I needed to come across, would be a bit more spaced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I
think Nic's turn 0 was much nicer, and actually we skipped through a lot of it and we skipped rock setup. But I think it's always something that's worth looking at, and it's always an area that a player can work on and improve and give more thought and time to. As it was, the way that Nic approached, he had gas clouds shielding him from the fangers. It was flanking. And then, Martyn, I think for you have rock clustered too tight, considering you have 2 medium-based ships with mediocre dials.
Yeah.
And what you want to be doing, I think, probably is giving yourself more space, as you know, right? But you need to be giving yourself more space for those ships to be able to maneuver through and still be taking actions.
Sure.
From memory, I think Martyn did attempt to space the rocks and space the obstacles a little bit.
Yeah, so you can see 2 in 2 corners and then possibly a gas cloud as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, to highlight the kind of importance of that. So if we look at that central kind of lobster claw shaped gas cloud, if that wasn't there, if that is in a different point and the game otherwise goes exactly as it did, it's hugely different, right? There's multiple turns where Martyn's big guns have mods, and it's very likely that the outcome is different. So yeah, I think to sort of swing back around to the start of the game, the obstacle placement with a list with a lot of ships in, with medium bases, turned out to be absolutely key. And also, having got that placement, the kind of willingness to have the engagement in that area, where the engagement happens, is down to both players. But But Martyn, you could have attempted to have it in a more open area of the board, although that obviously comes with challenges as well, with Nic's manoeuvrable ships sort of opening up their possibilities.
Yeah.
In summary, an interesting game with some pretty off meta lists, but a good example that it's still, you have to go through the same basics. You have to have the ability to kind of assess that list, get good target priority, get a good rock set up, and then kind of stick to your game plan. And I think Nic did a better job in this match of doing that. You had a more clear target priority, a more clear game plan, and I think executed it slightly better.
Yeah, it's have that plan, but be willing to adapt, right? Just when you need to.
Yeah, and then the adaptation comes in when you, with the dice in the middle, which were kind of a bit crazy all game, and being able to kind of reassess every time and kind of modify the game plan as that happens, and go from there. Any final thoughts, Lloyd?
I don't think we're going to see Martyn run too many more cartel anythings.
No. I will stick to what I know, and that will be either Imperial or First Order.
Yeah, but no, in terms of, I think you've covered most of the main points for sure.
So I think with that, all that's left to say is thank you very much to both Martyn and Nic for letting us record the game and then coming on to talk us through it. Thanks to Lloyd for making us get up at 8 o'clock in the morning to record this.
You're very welcome.
And thanks to everybody for keeping watching. Do like, subscribe, leave comments. And I think as a final thing, Nic, I think I'm right in saying that on Friday, the 17th of April, you guys are doing a charity event. Do you want to take the opportunity to tell us about that?
Yeah, so thank you for that. So Firestorm Squadron Firecast on Twitch are doing a charity event for the NHS. So it's their COVID appeal, COVID-19 appeal. So we will be starting at 8 a.m. on Friday morning, and we are going to stream for 24 hours straight, which probably means I get no sleep. We're looking for people to come on to Vassal, to play against us, to sign in, to challenge us, to obviously help contribute. We have a Just Giving page set up, which is, I believe, justgiving.com/support/firecast, but I'll have the links in the Twitch channel and on our Facebook page. So please do come on, join us, and help support, obviously, something that is really, really important right now.
And so if you want to see some quite high quality X-Wing, possibly tune in about 10 o'clock on Friday. And then if you want to see some terrible X-Wing, probably 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning is the way to go.
Yeah, my plan is to join about 6 a.m. and try and snipe a win at the very end.
Well, it's not necessarily going to be just us playing. So if we can get 2 people challenge each other and go and stream, we might do that to take a break too.
Well, with that, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next week.